On the polished obsidian table of the Krell war chamber sat a thumb-sized silver sphere, a toy by any galactic standard. Supreme Commander Voreth clicked his mandibles. "This is the great weapon you bring, Terran," his war council laughed. But Ambassador Elias Vance smiled. Because 10 light-years away, the Cygnus Vale star system, packed with the Krell's final reserve fleet, had just been erased from existence. The toy had spoken. The man who placed it on the table was Elias Vance, Earth's final ambassador. He wasn't there to parley. He was delivering an ultimatum from a species pushed beyond patience. That silver sphere was a reality cutter, humanity's darkest secret, buried for over half a century. Now, with 50 billion dead, the Krell Dominion would learn why humanity had hidden its deadliest toys in plain sight. The war had been a slow, grinding extinction. For 2 decades, the Krell Dominion had consumed human space bite by bite. They didn't negotiate. They didn't capture. They atomized colonies, sterilized biospheres, and erased entire planetary histories without a word. Earth's grand coalition fleet, the pride of human engineering, was shattered at the Battle of Proxima Reach in '93. After that, there was no stopping them. The Krell had superior numbers, faster sublight drives, and a species-wide contempt for anything they called soft-skin life. By '97, humanity had lost 41 star systems and over 50 billion souls. The inner colonies were preparing mass graves, not defenses. But what the Krell didn't know, what no one outside a classified deep black facility on Saturn's moon Titan knew, was that humanity had found something buried in the crust of a dead neutron star. A remnant from a civilization that predated the current universe. The team called it a reality cutter, a device that could selectively delete matter from the continuum, not by burning or vaporizing it, but by removing its quantum information entirely. It didn't explode a star. It made the star forget it had ever existed, and it fit in the palm of a human hand. The program was codenamed Project Lethe. Its lead physicist, Dr. Amina Okonkwo, had spent 12 years reverse engineering the alien tech, terrified of what she was building. The device was never meant to be used. It was a contingency so monstrous that even the most hardened military commanders refused to acknowledge its existence. Until the fall of Vega Prime, when the Krell executed 2 million civilians in a single afternoon as a resource-cleansing exercise, the calculus changed. Earth's remaining leadership authorized the unthinkable. They chose the Cygnus Vale. It wasn't just a military target. It was the Krell's spiritual heartland, the sacred ground where their ancestors had supposedly first clawed their way into the cosmos. Destroying it would not merely cripple their war machine. It would shatter their identity. Ambassador Elias Vance was dispatched to the front lines not to beg for peace, but to deliver a message in person. The reality cutter in his pocket was a detonator tied to a singularity probe hidden in the Vale's central pulsar. The moment he activated it, the entire star cluster would be deconstructed. No explosion, no radiation, no debris. Just a silent, perfect nothing. But Vance's mission had a fatal flaw. For the device to work, he had to be inside Krell command territory, close enough to ensure the species witnessed the unthinkable. He walked into the obsidian chamber alone, the sphere cold against his palm, knowing he was likely walking to his death. The Krell Supreme Commander Voreth had no idea that the soft-skinned diplomat standing before him with a child's toy was holding the complete annihilation of Krell eternity in his hand. The laughter was still reverberating when the war room's tactical hololith flickered, its clean blue grid collapsing into screaming red error codes. A junior sensor officer, a Krell-designated Zeichstel, barely mature enough to be at this briefing, emitted a subsonic shriek that cut through the chamber like a monomolecular blade. Every mandible in the room clicked shut. Supreme Commander Voreth turned his massive, armored head toward the officer's station, his 6 crimson eyes narrowing. "What is it?" he snarled. "The Cygnus Vale, Commander. It is. Gone." The officer's voice was now barely audible, his translator implant struggling to form coherent speech. All starmass readings vanished. Every gravitational anchor, every orbital colony, every ship register. The entire stellar cluster has ceased to register on any subspace band. The War Council erupted into chaos, their armored bulk shifting with confusion and rising dread. Voreth slammed one clawed fist onto the stone table, cracking the polished obsidian. Silence. He turned back to the human Ambassador Elias Vance, who had not moved an inch. The tiny silver sphere still rested between them, humming with a soft, almost gentle vibration. Vance placed his index finger on the sphere and the hum deepened. "Commander," he said, his tone flat as vacuum, "that toy just erased 12 worlds, 50 million soldiers, and your last advantage. This is not a parley. This is an ultimatum." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The Krell commanders, beasts bred for conquest, who had crushed 100 civilizations, stared at the unremarkable soft-skinned diplomat and felt something entirely alien. Fear. Not tactical caution, not strategic respect. Raw, primal fear. Because they understood in that frozen moment that humanity had not come to negotiate survival. They had come to dictate terms from a position of absolute, incomprehensible power. Light years away, deep within a shielded bunker on Titan, the architect of that power watched the telemetry stream in with shaking hands. Dr. Amina Okonkwo had not slept in 4 days. Her team of 30 physicists and ethical advisors crowded around the holographic display, witnessing the fruit of 12 years of agonizing labor. When the probe's quantum signature confirmed the successful deletion of the Cygnus Veil pulsar network, a collective gasp filled the room. Not celebration. Horror. One of the younger researchers, a theoretical cosmologist named Keller, vomited into a waste receptacle. The probe had not burned or atomized the system. It had surgically removed its informational scaffolding from the continuum. For every inhabited world, every Krell brood nursery and temple spire, there was now no past, no present, no future. They were not dead. They were unwritten. Okonkwo whispered to herself, quoting the ancient Greek concept that had haunted her for 12 years. Lethe, oblivion, the river of forgetting. She reached for the hard-line communicator that would patch her directly into Ambassador Vance's neural implant, her thumb hovering over the key that could recall the probe and abort the next phase. She didn't press it. Not yet. In the Krell war chamber, the fear curdled into something else, desperation. And desperation made predators reckless. Voreth's mandibles twitched as his own neural link spiked with encrypted data from his intelligence core. The Krell had not risen to dominate this arm of the galaxy through brute force alone. They had contingency upon contingency. A subordinate general whispered into Voreth's audio receptors. The Phantom Fleet had already slipped past the human defense grid during the chaos. They were now positioned within firing range of Earth itself, holding a Planet Cracker warhead salvaged from a long-dead precursor race. Voreth felt the return of cold confidence. He looked at Vance, a slow, grinding chuckle escaping his throat. "Impressive, Terran, truly, but you have made a fatal miscalculation. While you were delivering your grand speech, my stealth armada, the Shadow Ascendancy, maneuvered behind your lines. They now hold your cradle world in their sights. One word from me and your Earth becomes a debris field. How many billions of your own soft skins will you sacrifice for your ultimatum now?" Vance's expression did not change. He tilted his head slightly as if listening to a distant sound. It was Okonkwo's voice in his ear, relayed through the neural implant. "The Phantom Fleet is real. We're detecting their positioning. They have a 7-minute window before our home fleet can intercept. Ambassador, you are holding the only immediate countermeasure. The sphere in your hand is not just a detonator. It is a localized interface. You can target the fleet manually, but the energy cost will deplete the probe's core, leaving the remaining Krell strongholds intact." She paused. "Elias, if you do this, you save Earth but lose the long game. Judgment must be instantaneous." The council waited, their scaled faces alight with arrogant triumph. Voreth leaned forward. "You see, diplomat, we are not so easily cowed. You erased our sacred veil. We will erase your home. It is balance. It is the way of the strong." Outside the chamber, the warship's own alarms began to blare, faint, distant, as the ship's AI detected a massive subspace disturbance originating from the Sol system. The Phantom Fleet was charging their Planet Cracker. Vance picked up the silver sphere. It was no larger than a child's marble. He held it between thumb and forefinger, the hum intensifying to a pure, almost musical note. The Krell guards raised their plasma lances, but Voreth held up a claw. "You would not dare. Your world dies if I signal." Vance met his gaze, and for the first time a small, sad smile crossed his lips. "Commander," he said, "you still don't understand what this toy does. It doesn't need a probe, it doesn't need a star, it can target anything, anywhere, in real time, including a single fleet, including a single warship, including a single creature standing 7 feet in front of me." He rotated the sphere, and a targeting hologram winked into existence around it, showing the precise coordinates of the Phantom fleet. "I can delete your armada in the next half-second. Then I can delete your flagship. Then I can delete you. And I can do it before your neural signal reaches the fleet's trigger." The air froze. Voreth's eyes widened, and for the first time in 2 centuries of war, the supreme commander of the Krell Dominion felt his own mortality press against his throat like a cold blade. And then the lights in the chamber shifted to a deep, emergency red spectrum. A synthesized Terran voice, transmitted directly into Vance's implant, whispered, "Ambassador, the Krell fleet has launched their weapon. Earth is burning." The words hit Elias Vance like a physical blow. He had steeled himself for every variable except this one. Earth was burning. The Krell had launched. In the 8 seconds it took for the subspace distortion to reach his neural implant, almost 1 billion people had been atomized. The planet's defense grid had held, barely, deflecting the worst of the planet Cracker's initial detonation, but the kinetic bleed-through had triggered firestorms across 4 continents. Shanghai, Lagos, the western seaboard, all were now rising columns of black smoke visible from lunar orbit. On Titan, Dr. Amina Okonkwo watched the telemetry through clenched teeth, her knuckles white. "Grid integrity at 12%, she whispered into the open channel. "Ambassador, they're charging a second round. You have to act now." Supreme Commander Voreth's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. He had seen the flicker of horror cross the human's face. "So, Terran, the cost is now mutual. You erased our sacred veil. We have scarred your cradle. This is equilibrium, but I am merciful. Surrender the device, and I will order my fleet to stand down before the second warhead finishes its charge cycle. Refuse, and your world becomes an asteroid field." Vance's grip on the silver sphere tightened. He could feel the hum pulsing against his palm, a high-frequency vibration that seemed to sync with the frantic beat of his own heart. He looked at the Krell commander, then at the War Council, then at the tactical hololith still screaming error codes. "You think this is equilibrium?" Vance's voice was barely above a whisper, but the entire chamber heard him. The sphere began to glow. "You think you've hurt us. You don't know what you've just done." He pressed his thumb into the sphere's surface, and the device unfolded like liquid mercury, forming a targeting ring in the air before him. The coordinates of the Phantom fleet crystallized in 3-dimensional light. 42 ships, including the planet Cracker cruiser, positioned in a tight orbital shell around Luna. With a thought, Vance selected all of them and executed. The sphere emitted a single pure tone, the B-flat of a tuning fork become cosmic, and in the space of a breath, the entire Krell stealth armada ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, no radiation trace. One moment the scanner plot was dense with enemy signatures. The next it was blank. The Planet Cracker warhead mid-charge simply vanished along with the ship that carried it. On Earth, the firestorm still raged, but the immediate threat was gone. The second round never came. In the war chamber, Voreth's triumphant expression shattered. His eyes swiveled wildly to his sensor officer. "Report," the officer could only croak. "The fleet is not there, Commander. All subspace markers erased. It's as if they were never launched." For a long, terrible moment, the only sound was the distant wail of the warship's own sirens. Voreth stared at the human, this soft skin who had just deleted a fleet as casually as swatting an insect. Fear was replaced by something deeper, awe, and awe rapidly curdled into a desperate, cunning rage. But Ambassador Vance wasn't listening to Voreth. He was listening to Okonkwo. Her voice was suddenly sharp, laced with panic. "Elias, abort." The energy spike from that deletion. The Krell's deep space quantum scanners have captured the entire resonance pattern. They now have a complete snapshot of the reality cutter's operating frequency. I'm reading massive data compression bursts being routed to their core network. They're downloading the schematics. The realization hit Vance like a second detonation. The whole thing had been a trap. The Cygnus Veil, the Phantom Fleet, the Planet Cracker, they weren't desperate counterstrokes. They were bait. The Krell High Command had known about Project Lethe all along. Their intelligence service had detected the excavation on the neutron star decades earlier. They couldn't replicate the technology from scratch, so they engineered a provocation to force humanity to use it, betting everything on the moment the device would go active and expose its signature. The Krell had sacrificed their own sacred heartland, 50 million soldiers and 12 inhabited worlds, just to catch a glimpse of the impossible. Voreth saw the realization dawn on Vance's face and allowed himself a slow, grinding laugh. Now you understand, Terran. Our seers predicted your discovery before you even left your solar system. We have been waiting, manipulating, sacrificing. The veil was a necessary offering. The fleet was the final lever to make you pull the trigger. And now, we have the blueprints. Within a single rotation, our manufactories will begin producing reality cutters of our own. The war is no longer for territory. It is for cosmic erasure, and you have just handed us the only tool that matters. In the Titan bunker, Okonkwo's team watched in horror as the Krell network lit up across 100 light-years of subspace, the stolen data propagating exponentially. She collapsed into her chair, tears streaming down her face. She had spent 12 years building the weapon to end all weapons, and now it was being handed to a species that would use it without hesitation. She opened a direct line to Vance's implant, her voice broken. They've already started printing the first lattice cores. I'm seeing energy signatures matching our prototype at 3 separate Krell Forge worlds. If they succeed, they won't just erase Earth. They'll erase the entire human branch of reality. Every human anywhere retroactively. Our species will never have existed. Vance stood frozen in the obsidian chamber, the sphere now warm and dim in his palm. The Krell War Council, moments ago terrified, was now swelling with renewed arrogance. Voreth raised a clawed hand. Surrender, Ambassador. Perhaps we will allow a small number of your kind to live as curiosities. You have lost. And then Vance did something that none of them expected. He smiled. It was the same small, sad smile he had worn earlier, but this time it carried the weight of a final, irrevocable decision. You're right about one thing, Commander. This war is no longer for territory. It is for existence, and you made a fatal error. You assumed the toy was our only trick. You assumed we hadn't been watching you too. He lifted the sphere one last time. The dim light flared back to life, bright enough to cast harsh shadows across the Krell Council. You have the blueprints, but you haven't built your first device, and you never will. The sphere's hum intensified to a deafening shriek, and the targeting ring expanded, encompassing not just the warship, but the entire star system and its quantum information broadcast relays. In the bunker on Titan, Okonkwo screamed for him to stop, but she already knew it was too late. Elias Vance was about to delete himself, every Krell in that chamber, and the entire subspace databank that held the stolen schematics, in one final, irrevocable act of lethe. The sphere's shriek reached a pitch that shattered the obsidian table into a spray of black glass. The Krell Council scattered, Voreth roaring commands that died in his throat as the targeting ring enveloped the entire chamber. On Titan, Dr. Amina Okonkwo was on her feet, screaming into the open channel. Elias, no. If you detonate inside their core network, the cascade will propagate along their quantum-entangled relays. It'll erase every Krell world in range. Billions of civilians brood nurseries, their entire cultural memory. That's not victory, that's extinction. Her voice cracked with the weight of a moral abyss. You'll become the very thing we were trying to stop. But Vance had already made his decision, or so he thought. As his thumb pressed down for the final execution, the sphere suddenly cooled. The shriek subsided, replaced by a soft, questioning chime. A holographic interface bloomed in the air before him, one he had never seen in 12 years of briefings. It was a message, written in a script that predated all known civilizations. The sphere translated it directly into his neural implant. You have chosen sacrifice over annihilation. You are worthy. The Lethe Protocol has been overridden. Stand by for extraction. Vance had only a second to process the words before a column of silver light enveloped him. The Krell Council watched, frozen in confusion, as the human diplomat simply dissolved into motes of luminescence. The sphere, now empty of its operator, fell to the broken stone floor and shattered into 1,000 harmless fragments. No explosion, no deletion, no apocalypse. The chamber was intact. Voreth stared at the empty space where Vance had stood. What sorcery is this? But there was no one left to answer. On Titan, Okonkwo collapsed with a cry that was equal parts relief and shock. The telemetry from Vance's implant had transmitted every byte of the alien message before the extraction beam faded. She read it aloud to her stunned team. The device is not a weapon. It is a test, left by those who came before the Big Bang. Any species that deploys the Lethe Protocol with genocidal intent will itself be erased. Only those who choose to end the cycle of annihilation through self-sacrifice are granted the truth. The reality cutter never erased the Cygnus veil. It relocated it to a pocket dimension, safely removed from the continuum. The veil still exists. The 12 worlds, the 50 million soldiers, they are not dead. They are simply waiting. The message was a key, and with it came a set of coordinates. Humanity had not been given a weapon of mass destruction. They had been given a moral gauntlet, and they had passed. The Krell, in their desperate scheming, had failed the moment they copied the blueprints with conquest in their hearts. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic for the Krell. Across their forge worlds, the manufacturing arrays that had been churning out reality cutter lattice cores suddenly ceased. The stolen schematics contained a hidden subroutine, a failsafe woven into the very quantum architecture of the technology. When activated by the test's conclusion, it triggered a chain reaction in every replicated device, not erasing matter, but erasing the capability to erase. The Forge World reactors overloaded in cascading containment failures, but instead of annihilating their star systems, they simply shut down permanently. The Krell's most advanced industrial infrastructure was bricked in an instant, reduced to inert metal and cold plasma conduits. The Dominion's military might collapse overnight. Without their forge worlds, they couldn't repair their warships, couldn't build new weapons, couldn't sustain their war machine. The Grand Fleet, spread thin across 100 systems, found itself stranded, supply lines severed, morale shattered. The species that had prided itself on ruthless efficiency and contingency planning had been outmaneuvered by a test they never saw coming. The seers who had guided them for millennia were disgraced. The High Command fractured into warring factions. Within a month, the Krell Dominion sued for an unconditional ceasefire, their ambassadors arriving not with ultimatums but with pleas. An ambassador, Elias Vance. He awoke in a sterile white room somewhere beyond known space. A voice, ancient, calm, and utterly alien, spoke to him. You are the first to pass in 4 billion years. The test was designed to find a species capable of bearing the responsibility of reality editing without succumbing to its corruption. Your kind is not ready for the full truth, but you have earned a seed. Plan it wisely. Vance found himself back on Earth 3 days later, standing in the smoldering ruins of the UN headquarters in Geneva, a tiny silver sphere once again in his palm. But this time, it was not a weapon. It was a library containing the schematics for a technology that could heal planetary ecosystems, repair dimensional rifts, and even resurrect the dead, provided the user had proven their moral fitness. The final surprising detail, the one that would rewrite human history, was that the Krell Seers had known about the test all along. They had deliberately provoked humanity into deploying the device, hoping to force a genocide that would trigger the failsafe and destroy both species, because their prophecies told them that one day a soft-skinned race would surpass them. Their entire war had been a suicide pact built on envy, and it had failed because one man was willing to die rather than become a monster. Humanity had kept its deadliest toys in plain sight, but the deadliest toy of all wasn't a weapon. It was the capacity to choose who we wanted to become. The story of Elias Vance and the reality cutter didn't just end a war. It redefined what war even means. For centuries, humanity had measured power in warships and planet crackers. But the real power, the kind that rewrites the rules of existence, was never about destruction. It was about restraint. The Krell Dominion crumbled not because they were weaker, but because they couldn't imagine a species that would rather die than annihilate. They saw a weapon, humanity saw a test. And when the moment came, one ambassador chose to erase himself rather than become the very evil he was fighting. That decision didn't just save Earth. It proved that we were worthy of the keys to creation. But the most unsettling part isn't that the test existed. It's that it's still out there, buried in the ruins of dead civilizations, waiting for the next species to stumble upon it. We passed once. The question is, will we pass again when the stakes are even higher, when the temptation to use ultimate power is wrapped in the language of survival? The precursors didn't leave a weapon. They left a mirror, and what we saw in it has changed everything. If this story of impossible choices and cosmic gambits kept you hooked until the very end, do us a favor, smash that like button, share this video with someone who loves deep sci-fi, and subscribe with the bell on so you never miss an episode. We're building a library of stories that explore what it truly means to be human in a universe that's far stranger than we ever imagined. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay kind, and remember, the deadliest toys are the ones you never have to use.